Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Before we jump into the show, I just want to thank my sponsors and collaborators. 3D Network Technology, reliability is our core value. Visit www.3dnetworktechnology.com. And Genetech, delivering security strategies for healthcare. Visit Genetech, that's GENETEC.com for more information. We'd also like to thank the Change Execution Group and 360 Life Transformations. Visit www.360lifetransformations.com. We'd also like to thank Canadian Security Magazine and Omnigo Software. And now, let's get into today's show. Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast. I'm joined today by Timothy Sloan. Timothy, thanks for joining us today.
Man, I'm excited to be here. You and I kind of talked back and forth months ago, so really excited to finally make this happen, man.
Likewise. Now, I'm going to start off with the question I ask everybody who comes on the show as the first question. Who is Timothy Sloan?
And I tell you, the first sentence is probably going to cause a lot of people to just turn right off, because oftentimes when you say this, they have these expectations. So what I would say is you and I talk, to stay with us, right? Don't prejudice against me when I tell you that I'd spent the last 32 years in the United States Army. and that I retired as a command sergeant major in the United States Army in 2019. So who am I? You know, I grew up in the Army I started off in the infantry way back in 1987, and then I became an Army medic. And then I started working in the medical field. And if you're in the medical field within the U.S. Army, you kind of go back and forth from being in warfighting organizations and supporting those warfighting organizations to healthcare organizations. And they try to develop you as a trauma manager as well as a clinic manager, if that even makes sense. But ultimately, for the past 10 years, I've been leading Army healthcare clinics and healthcare services. So I retired at a Triple Army Medical Center where we had 4,000 employees. We saw about 10,000 clinic visits a day, 2,000 surgeries a month, 200 surgeries a month, and a overall patient enrollment of around 100,000 with a $430,000 budget. So that's kind of the overview of Tim Sloan. Now, me as a person, man, you know, I'm sure we're going to get into this, but I was really, really, really good at being a soldier and a leader in the Army. I wasn't so good in my personal life. And 2 divorces later, in 32 years, I retired from the United States Army. And that void from the personal life, I never realized, because I worked so hard and I dedicated so much time to the people that I was responsible to. And then when I retired, I was like, oh, hell, there's this huge void in my life. What am I going to do with that void? So that's Tim Sloan there.
No, for sure. Now, I'm actually curious about your career, and I always want to get people's insights on, you know, kind of how things came together. Because again, for me, getting into healthcare security, it wasn't something that I had planned to do. It just, you know, it just kind of happened, I guess, is the really short way to explain that. What was kind of the trajectory that led to you, you know, working in some of the areas that you worked in within your military career?
So, you know, it starts at the beginning, man. And now, God bless my parents, they're both passed away. And I don't tell this story because I never wanted them to know this story. Now, they knew that I wasn't such a great guy early, you know, late teens and whatnot, but they didn't know all the stuff that I got into. So 1987, working part-time, full-time selling weed. That was my job. And dealing with bad people, man, just dealing with bad people in my young 20s. And I was a bad person. Got into an incident where I got beat up pretty bad, man. I got beat up pretty bad. And when I healed up, I decided to seek revenge. And I found the guys that beat me up. And I found one of them. And I found him in a parking lot. And I put a gun to his head and I pulled the trigger. And the gun did not fire. And I dropped that gun to his feet, and I went to the Army recruiting office the very next day. So that's kind of how that started. And man, it's great to be transparent, but it's tough to tell that story because I'm really embarrassed about who I was during that period of time. So once I started the Army, things started to change. The discipline that I needed, the leadership that I needed to be successful. Tim Sloan, maybe not everybody needed that level of leadership, but I needed somebody to wake me up in the morning, to inspect my room, to inspect the way I look, to make sure that I was doing the right things the right way at the right time every single day. So although I probably wasn't the greatest soldier in the world, I needed the Army more than the Army needed me. And so I just started growing from there. And as that discipline and that leadership started to take an effect in my life, I realized that, man, I'm pretty good at this stuff. So then they led me into the healthcare field, and now I'm going and working in hospitals and clinics, and it's really exciting to me to do things that I've never done before, to work in those environments where I can develop business rules and strategies, because I always looked at healthcare as just helping people out, right? I didn't understand everything that went on behind the scene to make sure that when a physician is sitting in front of a patient, that they have everything they need, from logistics to intelligence, to provide the absolute best care that they can provide, and security, by the way, to that patient. And it was exciting to be part of that process. But the way the Army manages medical people is they kind of bounce us back and forth. So I went from fixed facility, as what everybody knows as a hospital, to working back in infantry units where I'm developing healthcare support missions for support in infantry operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. Spent 4 or 5 years in Iraq, developing those, working with the Iraqi government, developing their healthcare system, developing their healthcare logistics system, developing their first line emergency medical technicians, and even their lay persons to help with any type of injury that may happen on the street at the layperson level. So that's kind of how that all kind of came about.
That's really interesting. So it sounds to me almost like you early on you were kind of at one extreme, and then when you got in the military, you kind of went to the other extreme of being that leader and taking more on more of a positive role.
Yeah, I think they call that OCD, man. Yeah, and I played sports coming up, and always was very active in sports, and from and always being not necessarily the star on the team, but the leader of the team. So leadership kind of came easy. And so I think that I was a natural leader, but I did not have the skills and knowledge to be really that effective. And the Army gave me the skills and knowledge. And then it became a passion to be able to help people along their journey. I would see how I was able to improve who I was as a person through the leadership that was provided to me. And I always wanted to provide that to others. And it did, and when you think about the military, in the healthcare system in the military, the healthcare system in the military is probably about 30% active duty military and 70% civilian. So even though I'm putting on an alligator suit every day, I'm putting on my war suit every day, I'm leading civilians as well. It's not just the military or soldiers, it's civilians as well. Doctors, nurses, technicians, security managers, everybody that is needed to run a hospital all falls under that system. And that's who I'm in contact with every day. And it was really has been a joy to be in their lives and be able to try to help them to become better every day.
That's really interesting. And, I actually want to circle back to what you had mentioned about being in Iraq and really helping establish the healthcare system there. What was, I guess I'll ask a very broad question here, but what was that like? That seems like it would be a really interesting endeavor.
It was dangerous. Good, really great people, man. The Iraqi people are really great people. It's just like in the United States or Canada or anywhere else in the world, you've got a group of people that make everything bad for everybody else. They have all this negative energy, but you got just these incredible people, and some of the best people I've ever met in the world were Iraqi citizens that were they're just trying to make it better for themselves. And if you think about their history with Saddam Hussein and being in rule for so many years, when he went away, it's like, okay, what do we do now? And we work with them side by side in developing some of these things, developing, a medical logistics systems that can provide what a physician or healthcare worker needs at the time they need it. And that sounds really easy, but it's not. It's absolutely not. Training doctors and nurses and medical technicians, just trying to give them the infrastructure, provide them with the ability to develop that themselves. It was interesting. It was very interesting, but it is incredibly dangerous. It is.
Absolutely. Now, I kind of wanted to ask you about, obviously you had said you didn't have the, given the fact that you did have some leadership ability, you just didn't have the skills and tools to really make the most of that. How did your career that you had chosen help you to develop those skills?
Well, we have a non-commissioned officer leadership development program. So there's some formal training. Absolutely. So you go to a basic course, which gives you some basic leadership abilities and knowledge. And then you go to an advanced course, and then you go to a master's course. And the culminating is the Sergeant Major's Academy at El Paso, Texas. And that's where you really start to look at strategy rather than individual leadership skills. And you're looking at implementing strategy across the whole enterprise. And then it's just the daily grind, right? You're responsible for these 15 people. 2 years later, you got 45 people. 2 years later, you got 400 people. 30 years later, you've got 4,000 people. And, so it's the daily grind of learning what is effective. And then the last piece is just, your own journey, is your own seeking knowledge, whether it be research on the internet or reading books or interacting with great people like yourself and having conversations. That whole leadership development journey is a lifelong journey. It's lifelong learning. And if any day that you say, you know what, I'm going to stop learning, you go backwards. You stop moving forward. So you've got to continue to move forward and continue to add tools to your tool bag. And that's what I try to do.
Excellent stuff. Now, the one thing too, for, obviously everybody who's listening in on this conversation right now can't see you, but you have a backdrop behind you that says mentoring. Successful people never reach their goals alone. So in this grand scheme of things, I guess the leadership puzzle, what piece does that mentoring portion play?
So again, transparency, right? As you read that, man, I got goosebumps all over my arms, because that's how much it means to me. And that's why it's so important that I say that there's 4 things that get people in trouble in life: the bottle, the zipper, pride, and ego. So we'll talk about pride and ego because that's got something to do with mentoring. A lot of times people are too proud or too egotistical to think that they need to engage with somebody who's been along the path that they are currently traveling, because I already know better. I don't need you. I already know better. You don't know what's happening. You went through it 10 years ago. Things have changed. Well, I got to tell you, man, that's a terrible way of thinking, because we've got great folk in this world that have traveled these paths that we're now trying to travel. And they really help us to make things a lot easier. I try to tell people that I learned, and I've got bruises and scars on my knees to prove that I learned. I'm trying to keep you from having those same bruises and scars. Let me learn the hard way, and you learn through my mistakes, and we'll be okay. So that's what I try to teach. And it is incredibly important. I don't know if you've got a mentor in your world, you had a personal mentor or a group of mentors. For me, I probably got 10 people that I would call on a regular basis and say, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because I got to tell you, man, I never had all the answers. I had a couple of them, but I never had all the answers.
Yeah. And I think that's just part of the process of growing as a person too. I know when I was much younger, I had taken the attitude, and I think a lot of us do, of, I'm going to do it all by myself. I'm going to figure it out, and not really wanting to lean on that help. But again, as I get older, I think the older you get, the more you realize how much you really don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then you're not as prideful anymore, man. You're a lot more humble. And that's something that I think we all have to learn, right? Is to be strong and confident and humble at the same time. And that's a tough balance, to be able to walk into a room and command attention of people, to draw them in, to aspire to inspire them, yet be humble enough for them to be able to relate to you and for you to understand them. It is tough. It's not easy, man. I hope that I don't, as I talk about these things, because I'm passionate about them, that I don't make them sound easy, because they're not. Being a good leader is difficult, absolutely difficult.
And how old were you when you took on your first leadership role?
23 years old.
All right. So a pretty young guy. So what were some of the challenges being in a leadership role that young?
I remember one time I called my father, God bless your parents, right? And God rest his soul. And I was at the police station. And if you ever had one of your people get in trouble, you had to go pick them up from the police station. It seems like I was always at the police station because somebody was always doing something stupid. Because if I'm 23, they're 18, 19, 20, 21. You know what I mean? They're younger than I am. And drinking, fighting, you name it, man, always getting in trouble. And I called my father from Germany. I was in Germany. I called my father and I said, Dad, this is what's going on. I'm spending all my time at the MP station. I don't know what to do. Da, 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 da. And he said, well, son, what you have to understand is there's some shitty people in this world. You just make sure you're not one of them. And I know that's really, really simple advice that only a father can provide. But I would say in the beginning, that was the hardest part. Taking a group of individuals, men and women, that come from different backgrounds, different values, different ethics, different education levels, different races, different religion, and get them in the same boat, rowing in the same direction. That was incredibly difficult, is building those teams. One-on-one with an individual, I typically do really well. But when you leave them at night, now they're with their team, and you've got to be more powerful, more influential than that guy who's good looking, has all the girls, is funny, and everybody wants to be around, but that person is leading them down a negative path, which is an easy path. And I'm trying to lead them down a positive path, which is the difficult path. And that's tough, man, because he's with them 12, 14 hours a day. And I've got to balance that relationship. So yeah, that's tough, man. I think in the beginning, that was the difficult part.
Yeah. And I think, I guess I would add to that. Yeah. That those choices that people make that are the easy choices, they end up being difficult in the long run. So really at the end of the day, you're making a difficult choice. You may not know it at the time.
Yeah. Absolutely. You are absolutely correct. Like I say, man, I tell people I still pay for this. I'm 56 now, and I still pay for decisions I made when I was 17, 18 years old, man. Now, they've been lessened through my hard work, but there absolutely doors were shut to me along the way because of decisions that I made. Whether or not I didn't focus in my education, or whether I got in trouble running the streets or whatever, man, or even my reputation. You run into people that you haven't seen in 30 years and they expect you to be the person that you used to be. And they want anything to do with you because you're like, man, I remember you.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Like people tend to remember you. People who've known you for a long time, especially when you're young, tend to remember those, those more difficult things. Remember you for what you were, like you said. I think, I'm a Christian. I like to look back at the stories of Jesus, right? People,
right? Yeah.
He wasn't accepted where he was from because, people knew him as he was Jesus. He was that little kid, whatever, they kind of took him for granted. And yeah, I think it's really hard to establish yourself as you grow in the places where people have known you when you were still kind of coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you should say that, because in regards to religion in Jesus, because a lot of the lessons that I teach, as you know, religion can be a barrier to communication, especially if you don't share the same beliefs. But what I do a lot in my teachings is I'll pull lessons from religion and then I'll remove the religion from it. And the only word I may take out is Jesus, but the lesson is there. Everything you need to lead individuals is there. So if you are active in your church and you've got a strong faith and you're trying to develop as a leader, I would say, look at your Bible, man. Read the stories in the Bible and utilize those stories to help develop yourself as a leader and to help develop those that you are charged to develop, because the lessons are there. You just have to be a little bit strategic in how you communicate.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that too, because John Maxwell, who's a really well-known leadership author and leadership teacher, I have a lot of his books behind me here. I know it was kind of the same thing for him. He started off as a church pastor, and when he started teaching leadership, he used a lot of the same thing. He used a lot of Bible principles, but he, I guess, secularized them.
Yeah. I got to tell you, man, and John, I read a lot of John Maxwell stuff as well. If you go on to Amazon right now and you were to search leadership, team development, leader development, motivational speaking, you're probably going to get about 100,000 publications, right? And probably 70% of those great people, great researchers, great educators have never led a soul in their life.
Mhm.
And I'm not discounting their knowledge and what they bring, because I read a lot of stuff. But I gotta tell you, man, if you go to the gym and you go there to work out and you're hitting the heavy bag, you know, you're boxing, you're hitting the heavy bag, you're hitting the speed bag, you're jumping a little rope, and then you get in the ring, you're not boxing until somebody smacks your butt in the nose. So it's all well and good to have these principles of leadership, but until somebody smacks you in the nose, until you have to deal with individuals and individual teams and teams of teams, that's all a basis. You've got to develop your own leadership personality and your leadership values to really be effective.
Yeah, it's all good in theory, I guess, but like Mike Tyson said, you know, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah, I've heard him say that, man. What a great guy. You know, what's funny, now you and I are going to go off on a tangent. I watch a lot of Mike Tyson. And, you know, at first view, you're thinking, yeah, Mike Tyson, really? Mike Tyson? What an insightful guy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever watched his podcast, but he's an incredibly insightful guy. He's great to listen to. And again, as developing from a leadership standpoint, listen to Mike Tyson, because he can teach you some lessons. Now you got to reach inside, you know, you got to really look for them sometimes, but they are there. The lessons are there. What a great guy.
Yeah. Well, he's been through a lot. He had a really tough upbringing. Like, you couldn't really imagine. I think he started delving into drugs and alcohol like before he was even 10 years old.
Yeah.
So yeah, to come through all of that, to be the heavyweight champion of the world and then kind of lose everything and then really kind of establish himself again, there's definitely going to be some lessons in there.
Yeah, and I think the biggest lesson you can learn from Mike Tyson, if you listen to him talk now, he's incredibly humble.
Mm.
He's still a fighter. Don't push him, because he's going to come back on you. But he's incredibly humble, and it shouldn't have to take everything that he went through to become humble, to understand how being humble is such a valuable leadership principle, is to be able to communicate with your people by being one of them and not above them. And that's a great lesson from him. But again, and going that distance and to learn it is tough. We shouldn't have to go through that.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that you touched on earlier was just some of the personal relationships that you had during this time when you were growing as a leader, and I guess how you didn't have the same alignment at home with, you know, developing those good relationships and being as effective at home, and how that played a role on in your life and in your development. Can we talk about that a bit?
Yeah, you know, and I will go back to home, because I don't want to mislead anybody. I had a good father and a good mother. I had a great middle class, well-supported, take me to church, teach me the right values father who was my father and not my dad. And what I mean by that was he was more interested in turning me into a man than he was interested in being my friend. And I was okay with that. However, I was a bad person because of who I was, not because of what they were. I got to tell you, man, it was mistakes that I made because I just didn't get it. It wasn't because they weren't teaching it. It's just because I didn't get it. So great parents, great family. That's where I started off. But they also didn't give me the same discipline that the Army gave me. The Army gave me the discipline to utilize the skills that my father and my mother taught me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's kind of how that came about. And then, you know, as it is it anything, man, is, you know, you get into a job, and when you demonstrate that you've got some skill at it, then it reinforces you. It's like, oh man, I'm pretty good at this. And then you get excited about it, and then you get even more into it. And that's kind of what happened with me. You know, you take on your first leadership role. And even though I did talk about those challenges, I was pretty successful even in that first leadership role. So it reinforced that I was doing the right things. And then I just became more dedicated to that. So to put those things in perception, and I know this is going to sound a little bit of self-promoting, but it does kind of tell you how that journey started. You know, everybody comes in the United States Army as a private, and you progress at different rates. Now, I was selected to and promoted to command or sergeant major at 17 years in the Army. The typical sergeant major is promoted at 23 years in the Army. So I was promoted 6 years faster than just about anybody. And there was a period of time within my field, within the healthcare field in MedCom, we had 200 people at my level. So 22,000 soldiers, enlisted soldiers in the medical command within the United States Army. And there's 200 at my level, spread throughout the whole world. And I was a senior person at the top of that level in regards to time and service and time at that grade. So I was successful. It was really more about the people that I worked with than me, to be honest with you. People did respond, and I did take it serious, and it was a lot of fun, and my heart went into everything that I did. But I worked with some just incredible folk, man. I worked with just really, really, really good people. Michael Jordan was a great basketball player, but there were other guys on that team, you know?
Absolutely. You'd mentioned earlier some of the challenges just in your personal life. So I guess maybe a way to frame this would be, if you were to go back now and if you were able to talk to yourself when you were first getting married, what is the advice that Tim Sloan today would give to newly married Tim Sloan?
That is a great question. Dude, you're going to get me crying and everything. I think balance, life balance. You know, of course, you know, when you reached out to me, you know, of course, I'm going to do a little research and I'm going to check out who you are. And I see your family and pictures of you and your family. And you obviously have achieved that life balance that I was unable to achieve. And I wish that I would not have been so with blinders on, seeking to improve my career and had more balance. And my ex-wife will tell you the exact same thing. She did that as well. She's hugely successful in the healthcare field. She's a rep, so she works for a company who sells pharmaceutical stuff. She works in pharmaceutical, and she's hugely successful. But we were both really good professionally. We weren't good personally because neither one of us had that balance. So if I can pass that on to anybody, that's exactly what I say, man. Figure out a way to create life balance. And if the people that care about you, that you care about, say, I don't see you enough, you damn well better listen to them. You need to make a change. Because if you don't, you're going to be 56 years old with a bulldog sitting by your side, with a golf bag in the back of your car, and that's all you have. Because all the things that you really value in life, that you really care about, they're going to go away if you don't put some importance on them. So that would be what I would tell 23-year-old Tim Sloan, man. Maintain life balance.
No, fair enough. And the one thing I'll say too, you know, having that life balance now, it wasn't something that was always the case. You know, luckily my wife wasn't afraid to say, hey, we're not seeing you enough. So I had to make those adjustments based on that as well. So it's, you know, it's all a learning process. Nobody does it all perfectly.
No, absolutely, man. And I think back to the question about mentoring, that's why it's important to have a mentor as well, because typically a mentor will look at you differently than a leader will look at you, because there's a difference. A mentor is more invested in you as a person, as a human being. A leader is usually invested in you, and this is going to sound terrible, but it can be the truth, in what you can do for the organization, opposed to what you can do for you as a person. So that's where the mentor comes in. And that's why it's good to have people around you say, hey, man, you need to slow down, because 10 years from now, all this is going to go away. And what are you going to be left with if you don't take care of the things that are important in your life? And when it comes down to it, that beautiful house and car and great yard and community and whatnot, if you don't have people to share it with, it's not going to have a whole lot of meaning.
Right. And one of the things too that I said to a past colleague one time is, we were just talking about it, and he's like, how do you really make that disconnection, because we have so much happening at work, and you seem to have pretty good balance. And I said to him, for me, I'm replaceable here, right? If I ever start not performing, I'm going to be out of a job and I'm not going to be able to support my family anyway. So I'm not going to ruin my relationships at home where I'm not replaceable for a job where I am very replaceable.
Man, that is so powerful. That's absolutely true, man. That's absolutely true. That's a good lesson to learn. It's just amazing that we have to go through life's challenges to get to that answer. We need a cheat sheet, right? That we hand as soon as we become an adult. Here's your cheat sheet, man. Follow this and you'll be okay.
Absolutely. Now, recently I was talking to Daniel Henderson on the show, We've become friends through LinkedIn. We've had an opportunity to connect a few times, but one of the things that, and I'm pretty sure it was this discussion where it came up, but we were talking about mentors. And another thing that's important too, just for anybody who's seeking a mentor, or, even if you're getting informal mentorship just by learning from people,
Yeah.
just understand that nobody's perfect either. So, we've kind of alluded to this, but your mentor is going to be great at a lot of things and they're going to be bad at a lot of things as well. So, as much as you can learn from the things where they're really strong, just understand you don't have to, you take away what's good, but there's going to be certain things about those individuals that you may not even like personally that they're involved with or that they're doing, but it doesn't take away from the things that they're good at. It shouldn't anyways, in most cases.
Man, that's such a great point, and very timely. I'm glad you said that, because I received a phone call last night. So one of the guys that I work with, our relationship is not a long relationship. He and I just kind of met. We kind of started going into this project that we're working on. So I don't know him that well. I know what I know in regards to how I deal with him on a daily basis. Well, I received a phone call from a third party, another person that I don't know, never had a contact. And he wanted to tell me about negative information about this guy. And, I just stop. Don't need to hear it, right? I just don't need to hear it, because it's really not important, because nobody is perfect. And the reality is, we don't necessarily always control, depending on what you believe, who comes in your life and who leaves your life, how long they're in your life, and why they're there. Now, I may be in his life because of his trials and tribulations in the past. That may be my mission, is to have a period of time with him to help him to grow. His mission may be to have a period of time with me to help me to grow. So don't call me telling me about negative behaviors. If you're sitting in your car and you look at your windshield, your windshield is huge, right? And right in the center of your windshield is your rearview mirror. And the reason why your rearview mirror is so much smaller than your windshield is because what's behind you is not nearly important as what's in front of you. And you got to learn to let go. And sometimes people don't want to let you let go, even though you want to forgive yourself, even though you want to be the one to say, hey, you know what? I was, like I said when we begun, I was not a good person, but I had to let go of that person to become the person I am today. And there are people in our lives that oftentimes don't want to let go of who we used to be. So I guess what I would like to say to anybody listening today is, if you have a relationship with somebody, judge them based on their behaviors today, based on what you see moving forward. Don't judge them based on yesterday. Maybe it's important, maybe it's not important, but don't judge folk, because we all have bones and skeletons in our closet that we need to just let go of.
Yeah, there's a few great things there. I think one thing I'll say, I really love that rearview mirror analogy, because the other thing is too, yeah, you can only see what's behind you that could potentially be, of immediate danger. You can only see so far back, really, is I guess what I'm getting at. You can't look too far back. The other thing too about like negative information coming from the outside. So I have kind of a personal story with this. I remember when I first started dating my wife, an individual who didn't really know me. They had kind of seen me at a couple of things, seen me at church a couple of times, but they called and had some really negative things to say about me. And, my wife told me about this after the fact, but when I actually she told me about this after the fact, and I was pretty upset, because I'm like, this person doesn't even know me. Like, where are they getting this information from? And then I ran into them at an event one day, and I was like, hey, good to see you. And this person actually said to me, all right, because I said, it's been a while, and they're like, oh, I don't know you. And I got it took everything in me not to say something, because it's like, wow, you did know a lot about me to go talk to my in-laws, all those months ago, right? But yeah, it's interesting, because a lot of, again, you can't really verify information that's coming from people either. Yeah, obviously, when you can, if you know somebody well enough, generally if you can trust their fact checking abilities or their real experiences. But again, a lot of that's tied up in perception as well, right? You could feel that somebody wronged you or somebody slighted you one day, but there could be a lot of things that impact that. They may not have felt the same way. I guess one thing I'm trying to get at here, and I'm kind of going on a rabbit trail, but a lot of times we have these daily interactions with people where we may say or do something that sets them off, and it could be because of something that's happened in the past. and you don't even know moving forward, but now this person has a really negative perception of you that they're going to share with, they're going to share with somebody else. So you can only take that stuff with a grain of salt, I guess, is what I was trying to get to there.
Well, I'll share a story, and Joel Osteen, if you're familiar with him, he shares a very similar story, which is eerie, but in right to your security audience. So in Iraq, where our headquarters was, very high security, right? So you had to go through, there were two sets of doors. So you go through the first set of doors to enter an area where you show your ID card, but the doors behind you had to close completely before the doors in front of you could open. And to me, that's kind of how life is like, right? Mm-hmm. If you don't let those doors behind you close, then the ones in front of you are not going to open. New opportunities and exciting times are not going to come your way if those doors behind you don't close. And they may not be closing because you don't close them, which can be a problem, or because somebody else won't allow them to close. But they got to close so the ones in front can open up in front of you. And like I said, Joel tells a very similar story, which is kind of cool. I chuckled when I read it in one of his books because it happened to me, and I thought, that's kind of neat.
Oh, man. Now, I guess the other thing I'll mention too is you had talked about, you had said a little bit earlier, it would be great as leaders if we had a cheat sheet. So
yeah, man.
I want to ask you about Tim Talks. If you can share with us about Tim Talks and what you're doing there.
Oh, man. So you develop as a leader, right? And you talk to small groups of people, and for the most part, you think you're really good at it. You think you're funny, you think you're charming and clever and intelligent. The reality is the people in the room, they got to be there. They can't get up and leave because you're in the damn army. So it's a little bit of false confidence, right? Well, I got invited to go speak at a local university's graduation ceremony. And I was given plenty of time, man, plenty of time, probably 6 months to develop this 15 minute speech. And I did, man. I got on the internet, Google search, downloaded all kind of stuff, wrote this nice speech. It was really well put together, and I was prepared. So I show up to the venue the day before, and I'm sitting in my rental car out in the parking lot. And I just kind of wanted to get a feel for the environment so that I kind of understood my left and right margins and how I would feel. And I wanted to be on the stage. I wanted to see how my voice was going to carry and all that other jazz. And as I'm rehearsing this speech, I realized those words were not my words. It's like, this is not even me. This is Barack Obama and freaking Coach K and Michael Jordan and everybody else that I stole quotes and ideas from. And it wasn't Tim Sloan. And I really, really had a hard time with that because now I'm 12 hours to go time and I've got a speech that I wrote. What the heck am I going to do? So the next day I showed up about 2 hours early and I still have that same speech. And as I'm walking to the podium, I take my legal pad and I toss it in the trash can. And I approach the podium with absolutely no notes and no plan. Talking at a university commencement ceremony. What the heck am I going to do? Well, when I got done, the president of the university came up to me and he stuck out his hand and he said, "That was the best commencement speech I have ever heard in my life." And at this point, I'm like, I'm in a daze because, you enter that zone where I don't even know what's coming out of my mouth. I'm just talking, but I'm talking about young folk and I'm talking about the future and I'm talking about leadership and motivation and being better tomorrow than you are today and all the things that are important to us as humans and the human dimension. But I have no idea what I really talked about. And so the next words out of his mouth was, "Can I get a copy of that?" And I was like, oh, hell. Well, I had a folder under my arm, and still in that folder was one sheet of paper that said, "Don't forget the instructors, don't forget the family members." That's all that was written on that piece of paper. So I said, "Can I email it to you?" Because now I'm like, well, maybe I can get back to my computer and figure out what I said. I can send him something. He said, "No, I'll just take your copy." And he reached over and he grabbed my folder and walked away with my folder, with one piece of paper that said, "Don't forget the families, don't forget the instructors." About 2 days later, I get a phone call and I pick up the phone. "It's Tim, and who are you trying to fool?" And I was like, "Who is this?" And he said, we started talking and I explained to him the whole story that I just told, I didn't have a plan. It just kind of came. He said, is there any way you can at least give me an outline? I said, yeah, I can work through it. So that's really when Tim Talks was born, man, when I realized that, maybe I'm kind of good at this stuff. Maybe this is something that I've been prepared to do for the last 30 years, and I'm kind of good at this stuff. So Tim Talks is obviously, Tim is my first name, but it's also an acronym for timeless, inspirational, and meaningful leadership lessons and discussions. I came up with the idea a couple years ago, but I didn't do anything. And then I met these three guys that I'm working with now, and we came up with the idea of the Servant Leader Alliance, and we developed these pillars of excellence under this Servant Leader Alliance and developing leaders, and Tim Talks is one of the pillars. And I utilize that Tim Talks to break the ice, to be honest with you, to break the ice. Now, what I also did, and I'm going to go back a little bit, I used to send out a weekly message to our people. So when you've got 4,000 people, there's absolutely no way you're going to know everybody. You can do leader engagements every day. You can go out and meet folks in their areas, which is where you really should, where they're comfortable. Shake hands and kiss babies. But you got 4,000 people. There's just not enough hours in the day to meet everybody. So I thought, you know what? I got to come out with a way to touch people. So I developed these Tim Talks weekly messages that I would send out on Mondays. And I didn't even want feedback. I didn't need an email saying, I love that message. Don't want it. Don't need it. I just want you to have this. This is my gift to you. And then as I walk around, it's a conversation piece. It opens up conversation. Hey, I love that message you sent out. Well, why'd you like it? What'd you learn from it? What do you think about it? How are you going to implement that in your life? Or I get the opposite. Hey, that message you sent out this week, man, that wasn't very good. And that happens, right? And you say, well, why wasn't it very good? Why didn't it appeal to you? Why didn't it inspire you? What could I have done differently? So that's kind of where Tim Talks came from. And I do some engagements. So I do travel around and do engagements from time to time. And it's all part of Tim Talks.
All right. And I guess the one thing you touched on as well is the Servant Leadership Alliance. What's that all about?
Yeah. So again, looking for a purpose, right? When I retired and trying to fill that void and say, well, what do I do now? I think about that dash. So when we talk about the dash is the little freaking mark in between the day you were born, the year you were born, and the year you leave this earth. And that dash represents your journey and the effect that you had on the world while you were in the world. And as you get closer, when you're 56 years old, you quit counting birthdays and you start counting how many you got left. And that's what I found myself doing. It's like, where's my legacy? How can I leave a mark on this world, or not even leave a mark on this world, because that sounds like it's self-promoting. It's more about making the world better while you're in it and utilizing the skills that the good Lord gave you to make the world better while you're in it. So that's where the Servant Leader Alliance came from. I met three guys that are really great guys that had a like vision. And we started talking about, well, how can we create a one-stop shop for leadership development? If you've ever been to a symposium in this world, and most symposium or leader development or conferences or whatever you go to has a general session. So you go in the morning and everybody goes to the general session. So now you got 300, 400, 500, 1,000 people in this one big conference room. And you got great speakers who come in to provide general knowledge. And then you have your breakout sessions. So that's kind of where the Servant Leader Alliance came from. The general session, the Servant Leader Alliance, and then the Pillar of Excellence are the breakout sessions where you go to get specific information about the things that are interesting to you or things that you need help accomplishing or areas you need to grow in. And it's, we just launched the Facebook page. I know that's kind of old school, but a Facebook page this past weekend. You've got your base page, which again is your general session. And then we've got groups that folks can go into and join. Now, I warn people that may be interested in it. In the beginning, it's going to be heavy military people because that's my connection. However, what I'm trying to do is grow it into all industries. So can you imagine that you are a general manager in a company where you've got 6 direct reports that have 30 direct reports themselves. And while you made it up to general manager because you're a great salesperson, but you've not developed as a leader because you're a great salesperson. So they made you a general manager. But leading others to be successful salespersons or salespeople is not comfortable for you. Now you can have a conversation with a United States Army Command Sergeant Major who has led hundreds of soldiers. And regardless of whether you wear an alligator suit or a Brooks Brothers suit, leadership is leadership. Inspiring others to be better tomorrow than they are today, that pervades the whole of life in general. So it's leadership is leadership. So we wanted to create a venue where leaders in all different industries and disciplines can come together, share their stories, share their lessons learned, and kind of learn and grow together. And maybe you pick a mentor that's not even in your field, but they help you to grow as a person and as a leader, maybe not necessarily as a technician or a security manager. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes me go back to another quote. We've been doing a lot of quotes today, but none of us is smarter than all of us. So I think it's again, this is a great way to bring people together with different backgrounds, but being able to learn from each other.
Yeah, and that's what I try to do with this Servant Leadership Alliance page is basically what you do on LinkedIn, because I love your messages. You've always got a positive message. And I would rather surround myself with positive people than negative people. Gloom and doom people, I don't understand there's a need for folks that are like that, man, to protect all of us. We do. We need people like that. I just don't want them around me. I like to be around people that are positive, they're looking forward. And so your messages are always incredibly positive. And I do pretty much the same thing you do in regards to that. As I sit down at the computer every day, I think about my life, I think about lessons learned, I try to write a story and provide some type of visual that supports that story. Sometimes I steal from thoughts from others. This is the way I look at it, man. If I steal a singular thought from one person, that's plagiarism. But if I combine several thoughts from several people, that's research.
There you go. But hey, at the end of the day, truth is truth, right? I know.
Yeah, and oftentimes you just forget where you got something from, and where it came from is not as important than what it is.
Yeah, but if something's true and you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. You have information I know a lot of content creators will get criticized for saying the same things over and over again, but Gary Vaynerchuk's the one who I heard say this. He was like, but it's still true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, again, we've hit on some of the things that you're doing in terms of Tim Talks, Servant Leadership Alliance. Is there anything else that we should be watching for you in the months to come?
I would just ask folks that are curious to go to our Facebook page, to the Servant Leader Alliance Facebook page and not group, and just check it out. Because you know how Facebook works. You go in there, you hit follow. You're not going to get advertisements. I'm not in a money-making business. I'm not advertising. There are no advertisements. I'm not trying to be monetized. I'm trying to give away information and lessons learned to anybody who's interested in it. You hit that follow, you'll get some stuff pop up in your Facebook page just based on the way the algorithm for Facebook works. And then you're going to see groups. And if there's a group that you're interested in, and the groups are private. So you have to select, you have to hit request to join. And then once you request to join, then you get in that group and you start to kind of talk with other people in your same type situation. So there's a business to business group for those people that are buying and selling stuff, right? Let's get all the multi-level marketing people out the way, let them talk amongst themselves. But there's a lot of people do really great work in there. And so there's an opportunity to go in there and talk. There's a seek a mentor, be a mentor, or be a mentee, or seek a mentor group where you can go in and just kind of talk to folk and seek a mentor. There's a military specific group, which is Ask a Sergeant Major. So if you want to go in there and just ask a Sergeant Major a general question about what's going on in your life, you can do that. We're going to do a professional writing group. There's going to be a senior executive group for CEOs and COOs. Where do you go once you get to that level to continue to grow? And who do you interact with? If you think about the people that that are at that level, they're very lonely because there is no couch for them to go sit on. Who do they go tell their problems to? Are they going to go down to one of their first line leaders and say, hey, man, I just want to let you know I'm struggling with this? No, they're not. but to provide a venue where you can go in and share your thoughts and concerns, dreams and wishes with other CEOs and COOs and senior executive leaders about the challenges in your environment that you're going through that you may not necessarily have the answer to, and they've already been through it and they've already got the answer, I think will pay huge dividends to anybody who's interested in doing that. These groups are growing, man. If you go in there right now, you may see 1 or 2 people in it. Because again, we launched on this past weekend, and doing things like engaging with you today and trying to get the word out is important, so that people know that it's there. And what's equally important, and I really want to focus in on this, not looking to make any money. You're not going to get any advertisements or cold calls or multi-level marketing pitches. It's not going to help. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to sell you any, what do you call it, car insurance or protect your car. I'm not going to crawl in your bed and whisper in your ear and say, I'd like to talk to you about your car warranty. It's not going to happen, man. We just want to give away lessons learned and our knowledge that we've gained over the last 30 years. Collectively, we've got probably 120 years of leadership experience between the 4 of us.
Oh, that's awesome stuff. Well, yeah, definitely check that out. We'll make sure the links are in the show notes so people know where to go. Now, the other thing I have to ask you is, do you have a special message to share today with the Healthcare Security Cast community?
I do, man. And not just the security community, but anybody who's listening. When you're talking about healthcare, there's a lot of people that make things happen within healthcare. When we think about healthcare, we use the first image that come to mind is a doctor, a nurse, and a patient. And if you're not working in the healthcare field, that's really where your vision ends. But there's so many great people behind the scenes making sure that when that doctor and that nurse and that patient are together, that we maximize the effectiveness of that engagement and to set them up for the best outcomes possibly. And security in healthcare is absolutely one of those important factors, because we want to make sure that when patients come into the hospital, that they are safe and secure. And there is harm in hospitals. There are bad actors who come into the hospitals that want to do harm. And to create an environment where you feel confident, safe, and secure, I got to tell you, man, what you do for us is immeasurable. I know it's behind the scenes and very few people even know what's going on, but those of us that are in the executive leadership world, that are engaging with you on a daily basis, that are trying to develop processes to overcome these challenges and working with these great security professionals to do so, we understand the importance of what you do.
Great message. Now, we mentioned Tim Talks, the Servant Leadership Alliance. If we do want to, if anybody wants to connect with you, what is the best way to go about doing that?
Well, the best way to do it is to go into that page, but they can send me an email on servantleaderalliance.gmail. You just kick me an email. I am my WhatsApp phone. What's it called? WhatsApp.
Yeah.
Yeah. My phone number for WhatsApp is on the page as well. So if you just want to send me a text message through that, you can do that. If we need to have a phone call, we'll definitely have a conversation. What we do, and that's another great question, because what we try to do within that Servant Leader Alliance page is engage. So the best thing for you to do for me is, if I post something in there, if I post a lesson learned, maybe here are 10 principles of leadership in building the team, make a comment. If you disagree with me, disagree with me. Let's talk about it. And let's talk about it in front of everybody. Be respectful of one another, but let's not be afraid to have those tenuous conversations. I always ask people, when you tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, which is fine. When you tell me that my baby is ugly, I'm okay with that. But do a little bit of critical thinking in doing so. Yeah. Come back with me and tell me, this is why I don't agree with you, because of this item and this item and this item. And then we can kind of talk it out. And anybody who's listening that maybe doesn't like to engage on it can read it and learn and grow together. So for me, just to post exciting little freaking sayings and slides and whatnot, that's not doing a lot of people. I mean, they are motivational, but the engagement is where we really get the learning. So that's what I would say. Reach out, send a message on there. Tell me I'm freaking messed up as a football bat, and we'll talk about it. We'll learn together. So that would be the best way to do it.
Sounds good. Well, Tim, I appreciate the time. I thank you for this conversation. I think it was an excellent conversation, and I feel people will benefit a great deal from it.
Man, I appreciate you and all that you do. You're awesome, man.
Thank you. The Healthcare Security Cast is available on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, and Audible, and many other platforms as well. Check out our link tree on your computer or mobile device. And this can be found at linktree/Brian Hamilton. That's linktr.ee/Brian, BRINE Hamilton. Again, that's linktr.ee/Brian Hamilton. Or if it's easier, send me a text at 647-372-2042. That's 647-372-2042. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have or share any links you may be looking for. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, take care and stay safe.